In this video, I'm going to explain about the MPLS LDP outbound filtering configuration in iOS XR. As you know, LDP creates label for each prefix inside the routing table. For example, in this scenario, in XRV1, we have some prefixes in the routing table. The prefixes include 10.1.2.0/24. It is learned from the connected method. 10.2.3.0/24. It is learned from IGP, for example, OSPF. 10.3.4.0/24. Again, it is learned from the IGP. Also, in each router, I configured one loopback interface. 192.168.254.1/32 in router 1, 254.2 in router 2, and 3 in router 3, and 4 in router 4. All of them are learned in the routing table of the router 1. You can see them, do, show, route. As you can see in the router 1, we have all of these prefixes. Some of them are connected, some of them are learned from the IGP means OSPF in this scenario. But you know that we don't need to have label for all of them. In the MPLS LDP or MPLS LIB table that you can monitor it with the do show MPLS LDP binding, we have a label, local label for each of them, and also one or maybe more than one label learned from our LDP neighbors. Here, for the 10.3.4.0/24, we have a local label, and also we learn one label from the router 2. And also in the router 2, we have some label learned from the router 1 and some other from the router 3. The important note is that we don't need to have or to store all of these labels inside the LIB. For some application, we need some of these labels, and for other applications, we don't need many of them. And why we should keep the labels inside our LIB and consume the resources of the device, include CPU, include memory. Because of that, with MPLS LDP outbound filtering, we can configure which labels should be advertised for from, for example, router 1 to router 2, or from router 2 to router 1. Okay. In this section, I'm going to show you how you can configure it. Now, before configuration, let me explain that in each router, I define this loopback, the 192.168.254.4/32 in the router 4, and 254.3 in the router 3, and also the 192.168.254.2 in the router 2, and finally 192.168.254.1 in the router 1. And I want to advertise from each router to other routers only the label for the loopback 0 interface. Okay, because in most cases we need only this label. Here in the router 1, first you need to configure access list. In access list, you configure, or you select, you define which network you want to send the labels of which network to your neighbors. It is very easy. Here in the router 1, for example, we can configure this scenario, this access list. Now we don't have any access list here. You can see to show IPv4 access list in the router 1 can show us that we don't have any access list in this device until now. First, to show IPv4 access list, we don't have any access list. I configured this ACL. IPv4 access list A permit IPv4 for 192.168.254.0/24. It means that it's started with in the first 224 bits, one bit 192.168.254 any. Okay. This ACL can select only the loopback 0's IP address, and for example, it doesn't select the 10.1.2.0/24. Okay, and after that we need to go to the MPLS LDP, and here you need to go to address family IPv4, and here we have this command, the label command. With this command, actually, let me show you, when you use the label command, with this command you can configure label control and policies like outbound filtering. Okay, because of that, let me configure label, and after that here I'm going to use local. Why? With local you configure local label control and policies, means the labels that you advertise to other routers. Because of that, this is the next things that we need, local. And here in the local, you say according to ACLA, I want to advertise labels. Okay, you can use for, okay, local first advertise, and after that for A. It means that only the network or the labels for networks that match with ACLA we defined before should advertise to the router 2. But because by default the router 1 will advertise all networks label to the router 2, first you need to disable this behavior. Because of that, in the advertise we use, you can say advertise disable, or you can configure advertise, enter, and then disable. After this command, if you commit it, you will see that router 1 doesn't advertise anything or any label to the router 2. In the router 2, you can check the LIB, show MPLS LDP binding. Here we have some local label, some label learned from the router 3, but we don't have any label from the router 1. Show MPLS LDP binding, or do show MPLS LDP binding, can show us that here we don't have any label from the router 1. Okay, all labels learned from the router 3. Okay, because we disabled advertisement of labels. But now I'm going to use for A. What does it mean? It means that you can advertise the label for the networks match with ACLA. And ACLA means 192.168.2.541. Okay, and then commit this configuration again. And then in the router 2, in this router, now you can use again do show MPLS LDP binding. As you can see here, only for the 192.168.2.541 we expect to see that have label from the router 1 here. Yes, for this network, actually for all networks 192.168.2.5.4, because other 192.168.2.5.4, 3, 4, 5 also, or 4, actually all of them will match with the ACLA. Because of that, for all of them we have a label received from the router 1. Okay, it's so easy. It means that now router 1 only advertise the labels for the networks match with the ACLA. Here you can see again the configuration, MPLS LDP, address family IPv4, label, local, advertise first, disable, and then for ACL. Also, you can use to means to which router you want advertise. Okay, when you don't use the to ACL, it means that to all peers. For example, in this scenario, in the router 2, I want to advertise the label of 192.168.2.5.4x, okay, to router 1, but to router 3, I will advertise everything, okay. Because of that, it means that this only will work for the router 1, or you can say I don't want to advertise anything to router 3. It is possible. Okay, let me show you in the router 2. Okay, in the router 2 first, we need to configure the ACL, IPv4 access list, IPv4 access list A. Okay, permit IPv4 for 192.168.2.540/24 any. This is ACLA that I will use it for the 4 option. But for 2 option means which neighbor, IPv4 access list B, okay, permit IPv4, and then 192.168.2.5.4 one, or you can say I permit the actually host. Okay, 192.168.254.1 means only router 1 and then any. Okay, I will use both of them here. First, we need to go to MPLS LDP, as you know, and after that address family IPv4, and then label, and then local, and after that advertise. Now disable. With disable you say don't advertise any network to any neighbor, for actually don't advertise any label for any networks to any neighbor. Okay, with disable. But now you permit here for A means advertise the labels for these networks, and here I'm going to use 2B. 2B, what does it mean? It means that only to router 1. Okay, and then commit. Now in router 1, this is the router 1, do show MPLS LDP, do show MPLS LDP binding can show us that we have labels from router 2, but only for the 192.168.254x networks. For example, here for 10.1.2.0/24, we didn't learn any network from router 2, or for 10.230/24, or for 10.340/24. But we learned for the 192.168.254.1/32 label from router 2, and also for all other 192.168.254x networks. And it means that our MPLS actually LDP outbound filtering now is working. But in router 3, if you check do show MPLS LDP, okay, binding can show us we didn't learn any label from the router 3. Okay, look at here, we learned only networks from the router 4, not from router 3. What does it mean? It means that we configure 2 options here, and with 2 options you can say, for example, to router 2 send these labels to router 1 and other labels to router 3. Maybe in most cases we don't use 2, but it is possible, and it actually to configure 2, and with this option you have more granularity. With 4 ACL, with first ACL actually, that you configure with 4, actually you say which networks you want to advertise labels for them, and with 2 you say I want to use these 4 ACL to these peers. But if you don't configure it, it means that to all actually peers should actually we use the 4 ACL. But let me to inform you, in most cases we advertise only the labels for the loopback interfaces. Because of that, in most cases, it is happening that we configure MPLS LDP, address family IPv4, label local, advertise, and then disable. First, you need to use disable. With this command, actually, you say don't advertise any label. And then for ACL, and this ACL will match only the loopback interfaces. It is more common to use this method, but we have the option of 2 ACL.